Star Wars Spotlight.
Well, welcome back to the Comic Book Savant. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode is going to be another collaboration with my friend Heath Holland over at Serial at Midnight. This episode, we're going to do some talking about Star Wars comics. So without any further ado, I'd like to drop the microphone over to my friend Heath. Heath, say hello to the audience.
I'm going to pick the microphone up that you just dropped. I'm going to say hello to all the people out there. Thanks for having me back, man. This is becoming a regular thing now.
Yeah, I wanted to do something more regular where, I collaborate with friends, and because I haven't done it in so long. It's been so many years since I've done it, and I kind of miss it. And you're probably really like my comic book brother in arms. So it just felt right when we did the first thing, kind of just testing it out to keep doing it because it's fun.
Felt good, man. Felt
real good. Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about some Star Wars comics because that's like we can tell the people like we flip-flopped. Well, not flip-flopped. We ping-ponged ideas. Like you suggested the last one, the DC top 5 underrated DC animated movies,
right.
And I suggested this one. This is so if it's good or if it's bad. If it's bad, it's my fault. If it's good, it's James's idea. But
yeah, I thought that was good. I thought that was a fun way to do it. That not just one, like we just flip the different things that we're interested in, back and forth, and just do it in that format. Each time we do it, we just one person comes up with the idea, and we just kind of take it and run with it, and just make it fun that way.
That's right. Yeah. So Star Wars, like I have a lot of history with Star Wars comics, and I think you do too. But I have a lot of history with the older stuff. Like 90s and the early 2000s stuff. And I've kind of neglected the more modern stuff. And I know you're maybe more versed in the modern stuff.
Well, see, it's a little different because I'm older than you, of course. Age before
Not much.
Well, yeah. So, but I actually even remember the older, late 70s, early 80s Marvel Star Wars comics when Marvel put them out originally. Now, I'm not as versed with the more 90s stuff that what Dark Horse was putting out, right? Wasn't it Dark Horse that was doing most of the Star Wars stuff?
Yes.
That's where I'm a little shaky. I read some of it. Some of it I really love. But I came in kind of at the tail end before it, the whole Disney buying Marvel and it going, a lot of it going back over to Marvel, though Dark Horse still does some offshoots of Star Wars stuff. They got some kind of special deal worked out where they do like some kids-friendly Star Wars stuff, like the what's the YouTube series that they do? I can't remember.
Forces of Destiny.
Right, they do certain comics based on the Forces of Destiny that I've seen here and there. So they still do a little, but like all the main Star Wars stuff now is totally Marvel. But Dark Horse still publishes a few like Forces of Destiny offshoot type things. Also.
Yeah, Dark Horse. See, I've read like probably hundreds of Dark Horse Star Wars comics.
They had so many books, and some of my favorite ones are the couple of that I read that we'll talk about a little bit later. So yeah, awesome. I'm kind of like I said, I'm old school and new school. You're middle school, I guess.
I guess so. Like I didn't read those the Marvel ones. Like I want to, and they're in omnibus form now, and I don't want to. I think those omnibuses are out of print.
No, they've been reprinting all that stuff.
Have they?
And the Dark Horse stuff too. They're doing under Marvel. They got a certain deal because I've been seeing it a lot on through Comixology and whatnot. So you can find all that stuff. They have been re-releasing it. I think they even been doing I don't know if it's Epic Collections or they
there
name
are
it
some
classics or something like that. But they've redone them because I've been. Let me pull it up real quick.
See, when Marvel first got the license back, they did 3 omnibuses of the original Marvel run. They reprinted that, and I wanted to get those, but I didn't want to pay like $125 for them or whatever.
Yeah,
so I kind of snoozed on it, and I think those Marvel omnibuses have gone out of print, but I could be wrong. They're available. I see them on like eBay and stuff, but Like Amazon does not have. I know I could go digital, but you know me and digital. Like I'm just skeptical of digital. But
yeah, I'm trying to see now. I'm looking a lot of the Dark Horse stuff. They have. There's
some Epic collections for sure because I have a few of them.
Yeah, Epic collections. Yeah, they're Epic. I'm trying to see because I know I've seen the old stuff that I used to read at some point. I just don't know if it's all these are Epics. This is Dark Horse stuff been reprinted. Yes, it's in an Epic collection. Original Marvel years volumes. So they're an Epic collection. It's a volume 1 I see for sure. That's the only one I see that's labeled.
See, that's the problem. They just put one of them out
that I see so far, but it's tons of pages though. But I do see it, and it is an Epic collection. I know I had seen it, and this has Star Wars Legends Epic Collection, the original Marvel Years Volume 1. It has for the 1977 series, it collects 1 through 23, and material from Piazza 1 through 16 and Star Wars Weekly UK issue 60. So it's
pretty thick.
It's a volume 2. Okay, so down here it has other ones. So it is a volume 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 volumes. So you might be able to find those because they have been released. This is digital release date. It says October of 2016. So they're relatively kind of recent because this is with the Marvel branding on it. So you might be able to find these Epic collections of the old Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
You got me on that. I just digitally bought some of the Marvel Epic collections that were on sale recently. You've really sold me on those.
I think they're great.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about that down the road too. I'm doing a episode about digital comics, and it has me thinking a lot about all these different formats and what we're going to do. But I'll talk about that on a whole another episode. I'm going to do a deep dive on that whole issue thing. But yeah, so some of that stuff it's collected now, but it's such. I think it's so hard to dig into it because, like you said, Star Wars comics originally started with Marvel. Then they kind of, that deal kind of dissipated. Then for multiple decades, for about 20 years, Dark Horse really had and ran with the whole Star Wars comics for because they did it up until recently. So it was like from the 90s to the 2000s through most of the 2000s, Dark Horse did Star Wars comics, right?
Yeah, it was till I don't have the exact year, but it was when that deal went through. When the Disney buyout went through, right after that, it just made sense because Disney owns Marvel.
Yeah,
so they, I think it was 2015 or 2016 might have been the last Star Wars Dark Horse comic, regular monthly comic. And I was reading some of that stuff, and I got to be honest, it wasn't good anymore.
Oh, really?
It had kind of played out. And I think that a lot of people were excited about the Disney buyout and all that going back to Marvel because it had just gotten a little stale at that point. I think they'd run out of ideas and it had kind of run its course.
Yeah, and they just kept throwing stuff out there to keep the license going, probably.
That's exactly right. Yes.
So, okay. All right. So, what are some of the books, since we kind of laid the groundwork here with our experiences with Star Wars comics, and we're both huge, and we didn't preface this, we're both huge Star Wars fans, just in general, in real life.
Yes.
That was the stupidest phrase ever, in real life. This is not real life. But anyway.
Well, I am playing a character, so.
Yes, I do. I play a character when I podcast.
My real name is Jerome Hull. I don't know.
I can't.
So I started. I'll just tell you where I started with. So I started with Tales of the Jedi. I believe that was the first one that I had read in the early '90s. Again, can't remember exactly what year. This is not that kind of an episode. This is not going to be well in October of 1992. But Tales of the Jedi was mind blowing when it first came out. It was the adventures of Nomi Sunrider, who was a Jedi. And they were going back thousands of years into the past, kind of telling early days of the Jedi. And it was a 4-issue miniseries, And I remember it was like in the Wizard top 10 or whatever for month after month after month. And it was like they were hard to find. Like I don't know that I got them new. But I do know, like I remember looking for trying to complete that full 4 issues when it first came out. I'm trying to Google while I talk so that I know vaguely the date. But 1993 to 1998. That doesn't sound right. Let's see. Knights of the Old Republic. Okay, now I'm down a rabbit hole. Okay. Anyway, it was just like it was the first glimpse that we'd had of that era of Star Wars, like going back before Luke and Vader and all that stuff, and going into like the ancient history of the Jedi. And nobody had told those stories at that point. They weren't in novel form, nothing like that. And so it was amazing. And I just remember it being like everybody was talking about it. I can't remember if they did toys or not when the toys came back. I think they did. But that was my first exposure to Star Wars comics. What about you?
Mine started with, like I said, I've talked about this numerous times over the years on the podcast, that I got when I started in comics, a lot of my stuff was hand-me-downs from, I had older cousins that were super comic book fans, and they would just buy comic books in the droves. And my uncle was a postman, so he would just always do the different subscriptions, and he promoted them reading heavily. So they would just get them. They weren't like collectors. They didn't bag and board. They literally just had all these like bookshelves in their room, and they just had stacks of comics. And once they would get a little warm, because they were just stacked on top of one another, like maybe the cover ripped off, and they would just, whenever I would see them, they would just be like, "Here, read this." And I got a mix of all different kind of comics, so I got exposed. The movies were out, and I'm saying this is when I was like real young, like 6, 7, 8 years old, and I came across some of the old Marvel, comics, and I never read any of the Star Wars books. I've only read Star Wars books like more recently. So comics was always going to be the gateway if they expanded the universe for me to kind of get into it. So I read, and it was kind of, some of the stuff was kooky and weird. Some of the Marvel stuff, because they really,
Jackson the Rabbit,
yeah,
the big green
some
rabbit.
of it really went off script. But and they had to speculate because they only had the one movie at that time. They didn't know if it was going to be more stuff. So They went in a lot of different directions. It was just lighthearted, like fun. It's not what it is turned into now, because it was no blueprint. It was no other movies. It was hopes of other movies. But when they were doing this stuff, this was like, I think when I was just pulling up the Legendary collections, it's like that stuff was printed way back in like 1977. I was like 2 years old. So by the time I read it, I was considerably older, and maybe right around that time when I was reading these old books, it was around the time where Empire was coming out. And
see, that's what I was thinking when you were like, I'm a little bit older than you, so I go back to the original. I was like, you're like 3 years older than me.
Yeah,
like, were you reading this stuff when you were like in like like in a crib with a Marvel Star Wars comic?
Yeah, so I was a little bit, so I was a little bit older. So like I said, by that point, what came out in 83? Was it?
That was Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. So what? Empires came out.
I thought you were a fan, James.
No, I can't remember the dates though. I and it's funny. I remember seeing. Well, I got a story about never seeing Return of the Jedi in the movie theater. That is the one movie to this date of all the Star Wars movies I have not seen in theaters.
Even on the re-release?
Yes, I still I've never seen it on the big screen. Every other, and I mean every other. And I saw, unfortunately, The Phantom Menace in movie theaters like 8 times.
Don't crap on The Phantom Menace.
I thought Darth Maul was cool. That's why I kept going to see it. That's why I kept going to see it. But so I was reading them like real early. So it was in the time when I guess it was kind of in its heyday from the original trilogy. I got hold of the older comics and read them, and they were just fun. They were just fun, fantastical things. And then I didn't read Star Wars comics for a long time till the tail end of like Dark Horse's heyday doing the books, and I caught on to like Star Wars. Oh no! When the prequels came out, I picked up some of the Dark Horse. They did like one shots. Like one was with Qui-Gon, one was with Obi-Wan, one was with Pat. You remember those?
Yeah. Definitely.
I started back reading Star Wars comics in the more current day with Dark Horse doing stuff when the Phantom Menace came out. And then I slowly started picking up more stuff as time went on. But it started originally as a kid with the Marvel stuff, and then in more of my adult life with the prequels and Dark Horse doing the books for me.
Well, so I definitely want to talk about that because that's my prime reading era. But I have some facts here. I have some corrections so that people don't send in angry emails because Star Wars fans these days are pretty.
They tight. They get tight, sir.
They're pretty aggressive, man. Yeah.
Very.
So Dark Horse did publish Dark Empire in 1991. So that was the first thing. That was the first Star Wars licensed comic was Dark Empire. Okay. And that was Luke like struggling with the dark side. It's classic. Right. The Tales of the Jedi was a 5-issue miniseries from 93 to 94. I think it wrapped up in February of 1994. And it was what I was saying. It was like that old look at Jedi like thousands of years before the Empire.
Okay.
So nobody send in anything angry because I looked it up. But what you're talking about is that era when the prequels were coming out. It was such an exciting time, and I talk about this from time to time. People who are newer to Star Wars with the newer trilogy, or people who are maybe even older than me, have a different interpretation of if you lived through the original Star Wars era and you were like 15 when you got to see Star Wars in 1977, you have a feeling that I will never be able to have. But that period from like 99 to 2005. Was so exciting. The prequel era was so exciting. And the movies, obviously didn't live up to expectations. I'm not against those movies. I like them for what they are. But they did not live up to expectations. But what surrounded those movies, all the comic books and like the Clone Wars micro series that was coming on, the Cartoon Network, the like 3-minute cartoons.
Yeah, I love those.
Man, it was such a fun time to be a Star Wars fan because they were just like we got – so, like, in The Phantom Menace, we got Obi-Wan and we got Qui-Gon. And then, like, spoilers for The Phantom Menace. Like, Qui-Gon does not survive that movie. But you could go read the comics, and it was, like, adventures of a younger Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and, like, how Qui-Gon would teach Obi-Wan the ways of the Force. And, like, they really fleshed all that stuff out. And then, like, all the Jedi, like, the Council of Jedi from those movies, you don't really get to see a whole lot of them. You get to see him die in Episode 3, but you really get to see him shine in the comics. And like when I think it was in 2002, like right after Attack of the Clones, like they did Star Wars split into two. The Dark Horse comics split into two lines. There was a essentially like a Republic title and an Empire title, and like the Republic title was telling Clone Wars stories. Like every issue was a Clone Wars story, like a tale from the front line. And this was before the cartoon, the computer animated series,
right?
That's getting a revival. So it was like the only way. Well, then there was the 3-minute episodes, but they were really digging into like the generals and like you'd learn the characters. I'm like, okay, I remember there was like a Ki-Adi-Mundi, the guy with the big pointy head. It looks like this looked like French bread head or something. Like he got his own. He got his own story arc, and then there was a story arc with there was a character called Quinlan Vos who did not. I think it was a cameo maybe in one of the movies, but Quinlan Vos was a Jedi who was like going deep undercover, like he was pretending to be dark side to infiltrate the Count Dooku's, which is one of the worst.
Yeah. It's a book. It's a whole book about him.
Yeah, like a novel book?
Yeah, with him,
yep.
He with Avenged Huntress. They got in a relationship in the whole nine.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, I've heard of him. I haven't read the book yet, but I've heard about
there's a whole storyline that went on for like, I don't know, maybe 12 issues, maybe more than that, where he goes like deep undercover and like pretends to be dark side to infiltrate like that gang, like Count Dooku's stuff, and then like Asajj Ventress and all that. And then it becomes a question of like, is he so deep that he has really gone to the dark side? Like how deep is it? It's like Donnie Brasco or something like that. And you're like, holy cow, like is he really turned to the dark? It was fantastic comic book stuff. So I will always have very fond memories of that era from like 2002 to about 2005.
Gotcha. Now I came in a little bit later because one of my favorite Star Wars stories is actually in that era. They did a Darth Maul prequel miniseries. I think it was like a 4-issue miniseries that's set right before the events of the Phantom Menace. Yeah, it was 4-issue miniseries. Who worked on it? Ron Moores wrote it, and it was penciled by Jan Dorsma. And I love her artwork. She's an awesome. I mean, she's done other artwork, but I just love seeing her do Star Wars characters. She kills it every time. But it was Star Wars Darth Maul, and they re-released it many times. It was it was a 4-issue. They traded it. Then when Dark Horse did, I can't remember. You remember they did the anniversary of Star Wars, and they took pivotal storylines and did a nice re-release 30th anniversary collections. That's what it was. And they actually put it out in a nice hardcover that I owned at one point. Also,
they're like black covers, and
and it had like gold embossed. Like
I still have one of them. Yeah,
I had it in that as well. I love the story. It just gives a little bit more depth to Darth Maul. He really doesn't talk. He snarls a lot and kills a lot of people, basically. And I think he's tasked to take down. I can't remember what syndicate it was. Let me see if the Black Sun.
Black Sun, yeah, that's where they're going with the Solo movie,
right? So, like he takes down, and this is the comic where Sidious sends him to take care of it to prove that he's worthy to go against the Jedi. So it's like his last test before him going into episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So it's a really cool story. With beautiful artwork, simple writing. Because Ron Mars, he's a pretty decent writer. I was familiar with him from. He wrote a lot of the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern stuff for DC, yes. So that's where I was familiar with him. So it was a name I was familiar with. I didn't know much about Jan at that point in time, but I became a huge fan of her through the series. And then she did this other series, which is one of my favorite Star Wars series of all time, which is Star Wars Legacy, that came out some years later over at Dark Horse. I don't know if you read it much or not.
I read like the first maybe the first 2 trades.
It's a fabulous story. I faded out in the 30s or 40s because then I started moving around and I wasn't consistently getting the books. But I went back once Marvel acquired the license and they got the stuff from Dark Horse. They put out, I think it's like 3 like epic collections or legends collections that collects the whole series, because it was only 50 issues, and then they did and they ended earlier than what they intended because Ostrander was having like cataracts issues with his eyes and stuff, so he was having a hard time writing, and they had that kind of ended abruptly. So it ended in 50 issues, and then I think he had surgery or something, and then they did a prequel mini-series kind of wrapping up everything. What was it called? What was the trade for that one? I'm trying to look
Star Wars Legacy Wrapping Up Everything, I think is what it was called.
I can't remember what Star Wars Legacy War. It was a 6-issue miniseries that wrapped up all the plot lines he kind of set up with that. And this one was like 100 years in the future after Return of the Jedi. It was the main character was he was a Skywalker in the Skywalker lineage, but he was a little bit more. He was, the best way to describe him, he was a mix between Luke and Han, kind of thrown in together. Mm-hmm.
He had some scoundrel to him.
Yeah, he definitely had some scoundrel to him. He was a pilot. He kind of hid the fact that he was a Jedi. It was a really good, fun series. They had Jan's artwork was like phenomenal. through the series. But that was really fun. So I really love that. I want to, at some point, I'm going to sit down and binge it and finally read the whole series in total, because I got like over halfway through it. And like I said, I got into the high 20s, early 30s, and it was just it just kept building. And they had Luke as a Force ghost in it. They touched on, it wove so neatly into the fabric of the movies and the lore. And it's kind of sucked when Marvel took, Disney bought Marvel and bought Star Wars, that all this stuff wasn't canon, because I still think they could use this stuff now if they wanted. They could use aspects of it, because it wove so, like, it touched about the prequels, and like the main villain in the story had tie into Order, what was it, 66 or 69, whatever.
66. Order 69 is a whole
nother thing. That's a whole nother podcast that we're a family friendly podcast.
Star Wars After Dark.
Yes, exactly. But so it wove into a lot of things and touched on and tightened it up. It made it all interconnected, and with Clone Wars and all that kind of stuff. It was a really good series. It's worth picking up. But I picked it all up digitally because they had it all nice and neat format, and they even threw in the War miniseries in the collection. So you literally, I think it was 3 or 4 volumes, and you get everything in it. So, and they re-released it now, I think, in an Epic collection. So it's and I don't know if they omnibused it or not, but I know they did a few collections of it, because it was a popular series, and they once they ended that, they put out a couple of more series with the Legacy name, where but it wasn't Ostrander and Dorisma. I think Gabriel Hardman, he wrote a series, and it was like with Solo's and Leia's like daughter. It just kind of perverted it some from what it originally was. I like the original series. I think I picked up a trade or two, but I've never got a chance to read it yet. But I know they picked a different Skywalker in the Skywalker lineage, and I want to say it was Han and Leia's daughter that was the person being spotlighted in it. But what's next for you on your list as far as things?
Similarly to Legacy, at the same time that was coming out, there was another really popular book that was going the other direction, which was Knights of the Old Republic. And that was another one of those. I think it was in the same timeline as the video game, the Knights of the Old Republic video games that came out for, I think it was Xbox. And that was, whereas Legacy was like 100 years in the future. Knights of the Old Republic was like another one of those that was filling in the backstory, and like thousands of years, the Old Republic. And I kind of feel like that's where the Star Wars comics that I like Star Wars comics when they are fleshing out what hasn't been like wide open territory, because like sometimes I feel like we'll get into the new Marvel stuff, but I feel like sometimes the new Marvel stuff tries to fill in way too many gaps, like in between scenes and stuff like that. I'm like, well, I don't necessarily need to know more about like what happened when Luke went to the bathroom, but like, but the old, like when you play with stuff that's like in the far future or like in the far past, you can really explore history. And that's what that like Knights of the Old Republic was really establishing, like the history of the Sith, the history of the Jedi Order. And I didn't reread anything for this, so I can't tell you exactly characters' names or anything like that. But I do remember that like it was that thing where like they're introducing characters that would play important parts in the establishment of the Star Wars universe. And I was always really into that because I did read the books, like the novels and stuff, and they like, in every scene in between, like, well, there was like 5 minutes free in the movie that we didn't get to see, so let's tell a story that takes place during that 5 minutes. But there's so much other stuff out there to explore, and Knights of the Old Republic was one of those books that I think it even, again, I'm not super fresh on this stuff, but I think it even did fill in I can't remember the name of the big bad guy, but the bad guy from Knights of the Old Republic, Darth Revan. Is it Darth Revan? played a big part in that.
Yes, I think so. I think it was Darth Revan.
Did you read any of the Knights of the Old Republic?
No, I caught on all that late because I didn't have an Xbox, and I heard people rave about the game, and then I saw once I got into like Legacy that it was a whole bunch of trades, and they were spitting out so many books because the movies were coming back. And I was just picking up a lot of Dark Horse Star Wars stuff, but those trades were hard to find because they got super hot once the new movies came back up. So I didn't get a chance to ever really get my hands on any of it to read.
I think those are in Epic Collections too now. I think anything that...
all of it. Yeah, I was looking through when I did a search on Comixology. It's so much. So you can deep dive real deep if you want to in all that stuff now. Yeah,
and it is like you were saying, it is a shame that they've stricken it from the canon. Not that canon is super important, because I don't, like they can change it with a snap of a finger. They can bring in whatever they want to bring.
And we've seen them do that so far with certain aspects of stuff that
like on Rebels and stuff. They brought in who was it? Grand Admiral Thrawn. They canonized him, but I gotta say, in a lot of cases, the established canon from the comics is better than what they've been able to come up with for the TV shows and the movies.
I can agree with you. Certain stuff that I've read in the comics, I felt like was a lot better as well.
I love these new movies. I like these new movies. I'm not a hater on these new movies. I have issues with some of them, but the story from the books, it got too convoluted. But the novels and stuff, they were, like hundreds of books.
Right.
But having said that, the general idea of like Han and Leia end up together. They have these two kids. One of them goes on to be a crack pilot. Like the daughter goes on to be a crack pilot. The son and eventually becomes Sith, and then like becomes this whole thing. Like that's interesting to me. And then Luke is the uncle, kind of like what we see in the movies. Like he's the uncle who has to get involved, and like it was really interesting. And there was like foreign invasions from this race called the I don't know how you the Yuzan Vong is how you
Mm-hmm.
All that was really interesting. Now I complained about the books and stuff at the time. They did the Yuzan Vong in the comics too, I believe, but I don't know, the established continuity of like the canon of the comics was actually really like it evolved over time slowly. And George Lucas, he would say like, the books are the books and the movies are the movies, and that's true. But they had to sign off on all that stuff. So it was officially authorized canon. And so Knights of the Old Republic was a really cool history title for going back thousands of years before the establishment of the Empire, seeing how the Old Republic existed. And I know some people don't like the politics in Star Wars. I think if it's done well, it's interesting. Right.
It adds a lot to the story, for sure.
Yeah. Gives you motivations for why people care, like who's this and why we should care. And maybe some of the movies didn't do that so well.
No, they didn't do it well at all. Let's be honest, they did it horribly. But yeah, even in the comics, they've done it a ton better as well. So yeah, and the Vaison, I think they were in Legacy too, because like it had a whole timeline. I don't have it, but of all the other events that happened in like the 100 years, and I think it was an invasion by them. It was really interesting, but yeah, it tied into stuff from the novels, the movies. It tied in. It used everything, and that's what made Legacy stand out to me, because I learned about other events that I didn't personally read, and it kind of fleshed it out and gave it explanation and gave it purpose, all in this story, and bringing it all kind of together in one nice package.
That's true. I should also mention, just to piggyback off of that, there were, in the early days of the Dark Horse license, there were lots of Knights of the Old... Well, they were Tales of the Jedi books that eventually became Knights of the Old Republic, and so there was like a Tales of the Jedi Sith War and Sith versus Jedi, and a lot of that stuff just became Dark Horse continuity that books like Legacy and Knights of the Old Republic would reference. So that's what you're talking about. Like it was, they built on themselves.
Yep. And those books were hard to find, because I wanted to get the Sith stuff to try to find more about the Sith, and those trades were always sold out. Whenever I would like check, or unless you wanted to pay an arm and a leg on eBay for it, You know, like if you wanted to just get it through like a retailer, they were always sold out. If they would get it in, if you didn't get it like immediately, you know, you just were always, you know, waiting to try to find those trades because they were hot commodities back then, for sure. Let me see.
Did you go ahead?
Good. No, the one thing I was gonna say, when we start getting into the more recent stuff, but I don't know if were we done talking about the Dark Horse kind of era before I jumped into some of the more newer Star Wars comics.
Just one more thing. Did you ever read any the Tag and Bink books?
I read one of the trades because they had.
I think there's only 4 of them.
Yeah, it was like one trade that collected their stuff. It was funny. It was funny to me. I enjoyed it. It was like, give me the premise behind it again, because I know it's the two guys, and
it's just 2 guys. Yeah, they kind of bumble. They're like Forrest Gump their way.
Yeah, and it was funny. I remember getting the trades because this is when I was like ordering heavy through DCBS and in-stock trades, right when I was like in my heyday of podcasting. I would buy so much, and that came recommended. I heard a lot of different podcasters say it was this funny, comical take, and I remember reading it, and like they popped up in the strangest situations, and it was just so, you know, just funny. It was a different take on Star Wars from like a more grounded perspective of like if we got plopped in the middle of that craziness, like how would we react to it, and it just, you know, comedy ensues type situation.
Yeah, like they keep ending. I think that they're decent guys. They just keep ending up in these weird circumstances, and like they find themselves in the Emperor's throne room, like disguised as the Imperial troopers, and like in the movie, like he ties it into the movie, like when he's like "leave me" or whatever, he waves away the guards, and they're supposed to be the guards that are in the movie. It was just really well done, and it was written by this guy called Kevin Rubio, who directed a short film in the 90s, I believe, called Troops. And it was like a parody, and I think it's on YouTube, but it was like Cops, but it was called Troops, and it was Star Wars stormtroopers that get called out to the Lars homestead on Tatooine to like investigate a domestic disturbance between Luke's uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and then it's like they're like fighting. They're like, "We're gonna have to separate you two. Calm down, guys. We get called out here like once a week. They're always fighting with each other." And then like it goes bad, and like a thermal detonator ends up going off, and like that's what happens in Episode 4 when like Luke comes back and everybody's toasted. Yeah. Like the farm's been blown up. Is like in that movie, like it was a domestic disturbance that ended with a thermal detonator. But Tag and Bink got put into the Solo movie, and then I think it was a deleted scene. I think they cut it from the final movie, but I believe it's going to be on the Blu-ray. I don't know I don't have the digital version. Like right now, as we record this, the digital version of that movie's out, but not the physical release. So I don't have the digital.
I just ordered it. I just ordered it through the Disney Movie Club last week. I think I'll get it next week. Because I wanted to see that. I had heard about that, but I was like, I don't remember seeing anything in the movie, so I said they must have cut it. So, okay, that's cool. Because I know specifically they said we did shoot something with Tag and Bink, so it'd be cool to see the deleted scenes with the deleted cameo of them. That'd be cool.
It's an example of Disney taking something from the past and just making it canon.
Yeah, which is cool. Like, I'm glad they're doing, like, having fun with different segments of it and incorporating certain characters and certain things and making it canon. And I like that they're not forgetting the history or saying we didn't create it, so we're not going to use it. That they're drawing on the rich history that has been established over the years. You know,
I think part of the reason they're doing that is because people are so outspoken about it. Because it was I don't know. Do you remember when they announced that the established canon was like that they were rebooting the canon?
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I mean, there was like wailing and gnashing of teeth and like.
Because people was like, "What about Thrawn?" And people were like, I know I was worried because I thought Legacy was doing such a great job, and I was like, no, they were kind of wiping out that whole series, and so they're plucking. And I think it's a lot of good ideas in that series that they will probably pick from down the road because they're picking and choosing what they want and how to kind of reimagine it for the current day to fit into their existing stuff. So I think they're gonna pull a little bit from everything that came before it's all said and done if they want to keep pumping out these movies the way they are.
Yeah, and the only thing I do want to point out, I know canon's not super important because occasionally I'll talk about Star Wars canon or something like that, and people will say, none of it's real. Like I do.
How
get
dare
that.
you, sir? Don't you speak like that on this podcast? No.
Yep. But like, if you want to read it, it is on your shelf or whatever. Like it's in your digital collection. No one can take that from you. I get all of that. But when certain times canon will, and like if the Knights of the Old Republic has this established continuity that makes a lot of sense, and then the movies establish something different that doesn't make as much sense, then it's kind of a problem. And we've seen that a few times. I'm not going to name any specifics, but there are several cases where I'm like, that's what you come up with? It came out last week that for years and years and years we thought that Chewbacca was with Han Solo because of a Wookiee life debt. Like Han Solo saved Chewbacca's life, and it was a Wookiee life debt, and it was like a responsibility for Chewbacca to watch his back from that point on. And that's how it's been since, I think it was in one of the Brian Daley novels from the late 70s, like a Han Solo novel. And they just came out like in the novelization for Solo that Chewbacca's hanging out with Han Solo because he wants to make him a better person. And that is ridiculous.
Wait, that's wrong. Wow.
It's just like, that's the best you could come up with. Like, we have this other thing. Why don't you just use that? Because it works.
Exactly, it works.
But he just wants to make him a better person.
Wow, that's not deep at all.
Not at all. So Marvel. Let's move into the Marvel.
Yeah, when it comes to the Marvel stuff, out of the things that I've read, and I've read quite a bit, I jumped on the thing that I think attracted me to it. They grabbed some of their best writers because I was worried about that going in, and I was glad that some of the biggest writers that Marvel had and artists jumped on board. And starting with Star Wars, which they did Star Wars. The original run was Jason Aaron and
John Cassaday. Cassaday.
Yeah, right? He was on it for a while, and then they brought over was it LaRocca? Was it LaRocca or was it I'm going blank.
Yeah, see, you've read more of it than I have.
It's one of my favorite artists. I get them confused. Not if it's not LaRocca, it's I'm going blank. Don't mind me, y'all. But they had top talent on it from top to bottom. But I think Aaron wrote the first 26 or 28 issues of the Star Wars series. It's gone on. I can't remember who's writing it now. It's a good writer. I was just complaining about this because it blurs because I'm behind. Because here's the thing that is a barrier of entry for me with the Star Wars comics, the current Star Wars comics. They're expensive as heck.
Yes, they are.
So when they first came out, I wanted to read them, but I kind of had to wait till they went on sale. So I get them in bunches. But now because of with Solo and everything coming out, they had a bunch of sales back to back. So then and they kept expanding series. They have a lot of offshoot series and mini series, some good, some bad. Mostly are pretty good. But
Kieran Gillen is the guy you're trying to think of.
Kieran Gillen, no, he's writing it now.
I'm looking at volume 2. Hardcover volume 2, and it says author. I'm on Amazon. It says authors are Jason Aaron, Chris Eliopoulos, Kieran Gillen.
Kieran Gillen was writing Darth Vader, but they had a crossover.
Can I just say that every time you say Kieran Gillen, I feel like you're talking about Karen Gillian, the girl from Doctor Who, Karen Gillian. Now I can't even get it right.
Just say Nebula, because isn't that Nebula?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. See, I don't watch Doctor Who, so I wouldn't know her from that. I just know her as Nebula, and I know her from Jumanji.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So
I give up. I don't know. It says Kieran Gillen, but this is the best podcast ever.
This is ever. But
you might have to edit, man. I don't.
I'm not editing anything.
Just leave it in.
I'm leaving it in. They love this stuff because there's so much of it. But like I said, the original Star Wars, because it gets a little tricky because the initial series they launched was Star Wars. Jason Aaron was writing. Then it was Star Wars Darth Vader, which Karen Gillan was writing, and then they had a big crossover called Vader Down, which was it crossed over between the two different Star Wars books, and they had a special one shot in it. And I think it was so Volume 2 would cross over. That's why it has them both credited in it.
Okay.
Let me.
Volume 3 is Jason Aaron, Lanil Yu is the illustrator, and Mike.
You came on as the artist. They've switched artists a few times on it, but it's always top talent. That's the one thing I respect about it, is that they just don't throw, like, because Marvel does that sometimes. They'll be trying to make someone a name that's not a name yet, and they're not that good. But they're like, yo, if we shove them down your throat enough, maybe you'll believe they're a good artist or a good writer. But they've kept top talent on the book. So once one person left, they replaced them with another, really good person. I'm trying to pull it up real quick through my got my Comixology up, because like I said, I got all this stuff. But yeah, like I said, the barrier of entry was just so expensive. So a lot of it I had to wait till it went on sale to pick up. And it was some great deals once it does get on sale to pick it up. But it's pricey, and I had to, but they do have really good deals, like through Comixology and in different places. But like initially trying to buy it month to month at $5 an issue, I'm not gonna lie, I can't afford that. I'm not gonna sit up here and lie to anybody and be like, I'm big balling podcast. I ball on a budget. I say it all the time to you guys. It's like it's a real thing. And
they're very like. Well, so I'm reading the Volume 1 hardcover. It's got the first 12 issues in it. And I have that one and the Vader first 12 issues hardcover. And the Star Wars title, I mean, they're like 5-minute reads. And I am not exaggerating. I mean, they fly by. And not because you're like, oh, this is so good. It's just like there'll be pages and pages with no dialogue on it. And so you're talking about $4, $5 for a 5-minute read. Like that's
a lot.
That's asking. It's a lot. It is.
That is a lot. So yeah. Also, Kieran Gillian actually has come on to the book to take over after Aaron left, but he wrote. This is where it gets confusing, because it was the original when everything launched. It was Star Wars. It was Star Wars Darth Vader, which Aaron wrote Star Wars. Gillian wrote Vader. Vader ended after 28 issues. It was Vader. His series covered Vader between the events of, I want to say, was it between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, if I remember correctly? Mm-hmm. And Vader was it was a very specific tone, introspective. It was a lot of different flashbacks to stuff about Padme, their relationship, him knowing about Luke being his son, a lot of stuff like that. His distrust, a lot of the story arc, his distrust with the Emperor, and how the Emperor kept trying to take him out. Like, Sidious is trifling, It's a very good series. It's very, very good. Now they have a new series that ended, because he always had a finite story he wanted to tell. That's why he kind of Gillian said it in interviews. That's why he said it in the time frame that he said it in. Now they have a new series that Charles Soule is writing it's a long name, and they shortened it now, and I think now they're calling it Star Wars just Darth Vader, like the original series. But originally it was Star Wars Darth Vader Lord of the Sith was the full name of the actual series. And they decided, like, for most people that have common sense, that's way too long for a title for a comic book. So they've now, I think, when they kind of advertise it, depending where you see it solicited or advertised, it's just Star Wars Darth Vader. But it is confusing for newer fans that if you want to go back and find this stuff, that that's two different series with two different tones and totally different writers and creative teams. So just be on the lookout for that. The more current Darth Vader stories are Star Wars Darth Vader Lord of the Sith, and Charles Soule is the writer on it. Now his take is different, because his series picks up the moment Anakin gets put into the armor, and it's like the whole no at the end of Revenge of the Sith. It literally picks up the moment after that, and you see him in his prime BA-ness of going through. He's hunting Jedis, taking them out with the remnants of Order 66, and him being established in the universe as a super threat and being the hand of the Empire type deal.
That sounds really cool. You just sold me on it.
Yeah, it's really good. I read the first trade, which is really good, and I got the next, because they've been pumping them out. Because another thing too, and I think you've touched on this on one of your episodes that you're doing about comics, about, everything gets double shipped now. So like it's so hard to keep up with it. So it's like as soon as I buy one trade, it goes on sale. I buy one trade, the next one's out, and the next one's out. So I have them, and like you said, they're relatively quick reads because they have like they had. Like you said, they have LaRocca. It was LaRocca, Salvador LaRocca. So they have some great artists. So they do a lot of visual storytelling because these guys are some of the best artists in the game. You don't need a bunch of word balloons covering up their artwork. So they're relatively quick reads. So I run through them when I do read them, but I like to gather them up because I burn through them so fast. But I'm like, I was just looking through my collection. I was up to like trade. I think I read up to trade 4 in Star Wars, and I literally have 5, 6, 7. I had to start buying it in trades because I was trying to buy single issues, and they just come out so fast. So I
swear that's what Marvel wants us to do anyway. They have trained us to wait for the trade. They've actually trained us to just wait for omnibuses and
because they'll put out a new format. So I read up to in single issues. I read up to issue like 25, which is right where trade 4 ends, and then so I just picked up the next few in trade format, and that's kind of how I've been doing it. So I got 3 trades worth to read after reading about 4 trades worth in single issues, and then Darth Vader, like it literally just started last year, and they already have like 2 trades for sure. I think the third one is getting ready to drop or just dropped already of that new series. And you can get, now if you guys are interested in the Karen Gillian Darth Vader series, they have it out in the omnibus format. And I think I have links on the site to it because it's a great series. And it's only, like I said, it's only like 28 issues and I think 1 annual or something like that. But everything's collected in the omnibus format.
And that omnibus also, I believe, collects the Vader Down crossover issues.
Yeah, they throw that in there as well. So you get really everything related to Vader in that time frame, which was cool, too, because those books launched at the same time, and you have Vader crossing over to the Star Wars books, and he's like that big, he's like the big bad when he does appear, just like he is in the movies. Like, it felt like over time in the movies he lost that appeal. But he's such the big dark threat when he pops up in Star Wars that like everybody's like, oh, we're going to die if we don't get out of here. He's going to kill us all. And then you get a more in-depth, like cerebral, it's a lot of internal monologuing and stuff like that in that Darth Vader book where you can really see what was going through his head in that time, which is really, I really liked that take on Vader because it was towards the end of his life.
We were like 5 minutes, like before they started bringing him back to being scary again. We were like 5 minutes away from comics about Darth Vader, like taking baths and drinking champagne.
Yes.
Like reading romance novels and stuff.
Yeah. So that's really what Marvel, they had some other good stuff. They've done a solo miniseries that I have but haven't read. I read the Leia one. That was like with the launch of the initial Star Wars and Darth Vader books, first 2 books. They did a Leia series that is decent.
I did not like it.
Yeah, it was just bland. It was like I said, it was meh. Like I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. It was kind of meh. It was meh.
They've done a lot. There's a Lando series. There's a Lando miniseries. I
started reading the Lando one. I think I read it the first issue or 2. And then a sale came up, and I just went ahead and just bought the trade. It was cheaper just to buy the whole trade, so I need to read it through. I started reading part of the Chewbacca one. I think that's kind of like a kind of toss away one, kind of sort of too.
I read Shattered Empire, which was the lead-in to The Force Awakens. Did you like it?
I thought it was okay. I wish they would have played on some of that stuff more that they kind of hinted to. It was like they set it up. Like, they set it up. They do something with it, but they really haven't. Trying to see what else. Oh, they did a Phasma miniseries that I love reviewed. That was good stuff.
I love it.
I want to check out that book, too, because I heard the book was phenomenal.
I have the book and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah,
but I got it for Christmas and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, but that miniseries was good. I don't know.
People talk about Phasma being underplayed in the movies, and she is underplayed in the movies.
Yeah.
But those movies are filled with characters that do not get like Asajj Ventress, and well, she's not actually in a movie, is she? But Aura Singh, that's the one I'm thinking about.
But hold on, side note, she was supposed to be the villain in episode 1. You know that, right?
No.
Yeah, it was a big fight over it. That's where she was created. She was created as the big bad, and they felt a certain kind of way of having a villain, female Sith villain. So they paused on it, and they end up repurposing her for the micro series to use the character because they thought it was such a great character, and they end up going with the Maul option instead of it. But she was actually supposed to be the villain in episode 1.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How do I not know that?
Yeah, that blew my mind. That came out. It was maybe on the behind the scenes of the prequels when I first got the box set on Blu-ray, or it was on the behind the scenes for the Clone Wars show. I heard it was one of those where Filoni and all of them were talking about it. They were at a huge round table, and they talked about it. They had it all plotted out. They had sketches in the whole 9. She always had the dual lightsabers and the whole deal. And she was supposed to be the big bad. And
do you do it, George Lucas? I bet you could pull one off.
No,
if you try.
no.
I could do the Filoni, and you could do the George Lucas. But all right, we'll keep going.
Yeah, so that was a little tidbit right there that I was just throwing in there. But
interesting.
Yeah, so it's so much stuff. But I'd say it's been more good than bad with the current stuff. But again, the biggest hurdle is just the barrier, the cost barrier to entry is just high. So you got to pick and choose your battles when it comes to it.
I have to be honest too. I do have some problems with it's mostly decent, but I do have to say I feel like sometimes it leans way too hard into fan service. And comic books a lot of times are made for the fan service, but I feel like the comic books that I've read dip too deep into that sometimes. The first issue of Vader ends with him facing off against Boba Fett, and I'm just come on. That's your first issue, is you've already got these two characters fighting each other. Right. And then I was reading, so I've been reading the Star Wars, the Marvel, that hardcover that I got. And, who is it? Boba Fett is looking for Luke Skywalker. And he goes to, of all the bounty hunters in the entire galaxy, it's Boba Fett looking for Luke Skywalker. And he goes to the cantina on Tatooine. This is, after the events of Star Wars. So he goes back to Tatooine and he goes to the cantina, and it's the same aliens in the cantina. I'm like, these guys never left. And never mind that it's a spaceport, and so it would not be the same characters. It's fan service, and I understand you want visual connections. I know why you do it. I get why that decision was made, but it just bothers me a little bit. You could be whereas a lot of the Dark Horse stuff would create stories with new characters and we could follow new characters. The mandate from Marvel seems to be recapture the spirit of those movies visually and with the stories. Play with characters that we already know.
Yeah, true.
And that's frustrating sometimes for me.
I get that. I can totally get that.
Just being honest. But I do enjoy that. Right after that, there was an Obi-Wan fill-in issue that tells a story. It was from the journals of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it was fantastic.
Those are awesome. Yeah, I love those, and it's all they set the table for a great Obi-Wan movie based on that concept. And as you get further into the series, Luke finds a journal of Yoda, and then they do stories about Yoda based off of journal entries that's really interesting. So
is a Yoda in the bathtub with champagne?
No, it's a whole story. It's the trade that I need to read next, actually. Where in the issues that I finished reading through the single issues, he based on stuff he reads in the journal for Obi-Wan, he stumbles he's helping him, and Luke is going through, and it's a big thing. They're trying to cover the plot hole of between Star Wars and Empire. How did Luke progress so deeply in his Force powers? And it was because he found this journal of Obi-Wan, and it kind of leads him to try to find Jedi artifacts, and gets into the lore, which plays into the movies now on why Luke, it became a thing early on, and he continues throughout Just like I always hate the scene cut from Return of the Jedi where they show Luke construct his lightsaber, his new lightsaber. Like, that scene is awesome. When I finally got
That's an amazing scene.
Yeah, and they cut it. So it plays into all that lore from that kind of stuff, that he always had been a student and was hungry because he only had Yoda briefly, and Obi-Wan even more briefly, to kind of teach him how did he progress. And it sets up this blueprint of how he amassed all these books you saw in The Last Jedi, and the memorabilia and the different stuff. He was always searching for it because that was the only way he could learn more about the Force, to be an instructor and be a Jedi Master, because there was no master to fully complete his training that he had access to. So I dig those. I dig that part they inserted into these stories, because I think that is kind of important. Was like, Luke was barely knowing the Force by the end of Star Wars, and then he's using Force powers to get the lightsaber out of snow and cutting off folks' arms and stuff. And I'm just like, how he get that way? Like, that's a big jump from one movie to the next. I know some time passed, but it wasn't explained. So I like that they filled that gap a little bit more, and it made sense that he, searched through these, searched all around the universe. Like, he wasn't always with Han and Leia during that time. It was a lot of him exploring and getting into adventures on his own, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And taking baths with champagne.
Yes, with champagne. More bubbly, please. More bubbly. Yeah, so that's...
Yeah, Yoda's like, take a personal day, you must.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's really all the stuff that I wanted to cover. Like, it's so much more, but again, it's a lot. Oh, it's a good mini series that they did. I mean, it's not a grand slam, but it's insightful. It's Obi-Wan and Anakin. That it was I want to say it was a 5-issue miniseries, maybe. That's pretty good. That they go on an adventure together. I can't remember. This is before the events of Revenge of the Sith. So I think it's probably between episode. I think it's right before maybe episode 2, before the war starts. I want to say it's right before the war starts. It's like one of those adventures. You know that scene in episode 2 when they're going to meet Padme. And they're talking about the
elevator.
Yeah, the elevator scene. It's one of those. It's a riff off of one of those type of adventures that they had, basically. And it's a weird kind of. They're on this weird planet. It's these races that are warring on the planet, and I think they go to respond to a distress call. They get crashed on the planet, so they're kind of stuck there, and hijinks ensues. And it's cool, but it gives a lot of insight into their relationship. It gives some insight in Sidious watching him in training. It gives more insight on... I think the thing I like most about the series is that it gives insight on why Anakin would turn to the dark side, because it shows how he did excel in all aspects of the Force. And being in the Jedi Academy, he was ridiculed by his peers constantly and ripped. And he was picked on a lot. So he was not fully accepted. He stood out like a sore thumb because he started his training later, and he excelled in so many areas of it. And why he was so good with a lightsaber was that he was obsessed because he didn't have any friends. So he was obsessed with going through the holocrons and studying, where he would just lose himself in the library and go through all the different fighting techniques, and he would practice by himself, and that's how he became such a master with the lightsaber and became so deadly, was because he didn't have anything else to do. He had no friends at all, so he just lost himself in studies, and
really cool.
Yeah, so it delves in that lightly, and how Sidious was watching him excel and would take him out on the town to get into trouble. You could see him digging his nails in him very early by some of the little stuff they hinted to in this series, where Sidious was watching him very much so early on and throughout his training, and knew he was primed because of the things that were going on around him to be turned, very much so. But it wasn't just Sidious. The Jedi were just as much as to blame for Anakin going dark than Sidious ever was. That really makes it clear in this series. for sure. So that's
that
another
sounds
one
very cool.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that series. Just for that alone, you get a better understanding on the why he turned.
It's 5-issue miniseries. You're right. It was 5. It's
yeah, it's good.
Charles
if you can get it on
Soule.
trade. Yeah, if you can get Soul wrote that as well. So, and like I said, he's writing the new Darth Vader series, which is really good. So he has some. He's showing you some before, and then he's dealing with the whole after and with him being Vader and being like totally BA Vader. So yeah, that's a good one too. That's definitely worth checking out if you can. Get it on the cheap, pick it up. I think you guys will enjoy it. But that's all I have on my end, Heath.
Yeah, that's all I have on my end too. I think that the bottom line, where we both kind of agree, is that there's a lot of stuff, and it is a mixed bag. But there's more bad. I'm sorry, there's more good than there's more good than bad.
Right, and the good thing is now a lot of it, because of Disney owning Marvel and getting all the rights to everything, all this stuff you can actually get now in some shape, form. If you can't get it physically, you definitely can get it digitally, which is good. That because sometimes it's cheaper digitally, because like when these sales come on, I'm getting these trades for like $250, $299, $499. I'm not, even the I don't think I've ever paid over $10 for even that like Epic collections. When they go on sale, at most Marvel might have them at $8.99 digitally for like the Epic collections. I don't think I've ever spent more than $10 on a digital trade of any sort, because I just wait till they go on sale and snatch them up. So you can get them at relatively cheap if you don't mind reading digital copies, but they are, some of this stuff is constantly getting reprinted too. So you just have to look through like Amazon and stock trades, and maybe eBay, but you might be paying more if you find it like on eBay. So just be on the lookout for the stuff and find deals. And
it's all because it's all under the Marvel umbrella. It's on the Marvel Unlimited app as well.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, so you can definitely read all this stuff through one of the avenues we have given you in this podcast. But I think that's all we got for you guys for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. Give us feedback. You can always you can email me at comicbooksavant@gmail.com. We're both I put all the links up last episode. And you can leave comments down. This episode will post on the Comic Book Savant website, and once you see the post, it is a comment section, so you can actually comment on the page and let us know topics you want us to cover in future installments of this collaboration we're doing, and we will try our best to accommodate you guys. So just let us know.
Yeah, and I'd like to get some feedback about it too. So if you listen to this, at Serial Midnight on Twitter is one way that you can reach out. serialmidnight@gmail.com. Just let us know. Let us know you're out there. Did you listen to this episode in the bathtub with champagne?
Exactly. And also check out his site as serialatmidnight.com, and his YouTube channel, which is also Serial at Midnight. Just do a search on YouTube and you'll pull it right up. I got
the slash now, so I can be like youtube.com/Serial at Midnight.
Oh, so so now youtube.com/Serial at Midnight. You can pull it right up off of that, because he didn't have a custom URL. Now he's made the big time, so he has a custom URL. So yeah, check him out, check me out, and just give us feedback and let us know that you listened, that you enjoyed, and what, if anything, you'd like to see us cover in future installments. That's all I have for you guys this week. Thank you for checking us out, and we'll see you next time. Say bye, Heath.
Bye, Heath.